In my ongoing push to record all of the chapters that make up Book 2 of the Book of Uncertain, a Hyperbiographical User's Manual, I'm going to today read chapter 14, which is called The Box of Uncertain. And I mean, those of you who are familiar with quantum mechanics, the history of 20th century science, will immediately recognize the box of uncertain as a part of a thought experiment by Erwin Schrödinger, who was trying to come up with an argument that could prove his theory that that reality, that matter was made up not of solid particles but of waves, and that waves that what we think of as reality was the result of the collapse of the wave function into the probability wave into an actual occasion. And as a thought experiment, he proposed a box that contained a cat and a decaying radioactive isotope that could kill the cat, but you wouldn't know. It's not even a question of not knowing that the probability wave would not collapse until you opened the box, which meant that, if he was right, the cat was both alive and dead until the box opened and the probability wave collapsed. Yeah, I know. Anyway, Schrödinger's cat is an icon of post-quantum world. So this is called The Box of Uncertain. It begins with an epigraph. I insist upon the view that all is waves. Erwin Schrödinger. The calculus of the conjugal arcanum. 1. What a surprise! It begins with dark, a stark hello to today's naught, our father who art has left in the dust of 1,000 poems, spawn of the calculus of the conjugal arcanum, turned towards stunted tumult, unable to reach wild formations into it, knowing yields in passage between. Once entered, the descent never ends, though entrance tends toward unicorn status in current mental suspicion lockup. A legacy of too much light leaves us by the side of the road outside Winnemucca, waiting for a ride that never comes as the wind rises with news of the end. Going down, figures speech indicates slippage of words traverse the mystery of the great divide, well beyond the reach of records tell only what words allow. Miss former flow beyond sentences, solidification of breath's endless plunge, wordless, welcomed meaning. Ariadne's thinking threads meander, weaves not out, but in, though in and out both mean road leads into space, unmapped and hard to tell which wed edge of sky and earth, sweet union, Olson has it out of Hesiod, conjugal arcanum at the tip of the deepest root, imagination can forge out of nothing more than earth's offered opening into floating debris pattern, plover's regular passage over the sea to beyond figured stories, home-like configurations of distance, Pip's oceanic outcome, written in Book of Kel's sacred detail, fold on fold on fold. At this point of orbital extremity can any image reach the boundary necessary to activate detailed geography descent requires to plot the line unfolds here toward eventual bloom. Same old truth, the same anew. This upheaval opens to or out or between, midden heap of nothing's discarded remains, layer after layer after layer, which has already signified more than decency would have circulate in polite company, a normative exclusionary sig fix designed to keep power well contained and ordered, according to bleached requirements assured paternal dream regimes hold on former itinerant flows of betweens generous outpouring, hoarded in distant bastions of withheld permission where father lurks in the garage, arms crossed, distant, slightly stunned by all the noise, chaotic children's shouts, mother hustle, hustle to compose the photo, soon to disperse, leave only an image to speak of divides, and the whole of the other side awaits a yes. Two, in a sense, it is necessary that meaning abandon us so that we may be opened with the entire opening of meaning. Jean-Luc Nancy, The Gravity of Thought. Oh my, what can we say about this? There are some references in here. The Clantons, in case you don't know, and I'm surprised at how many people don't know, the Clantons were the family that went up against Wyatt Earp in Tombstone. And in fact, bushwhacked Morgan Earp, shot him in the back while he was playing pool. And I guess that was after the OK Corral. Anyway, there was an epic. I mean, it turns out it wasn't all that epic, but in the mythology of the American West, the gunfight at the OK Corral is epic. What else have we got here? Odysseus. Everybody knows Odysseus. In Brussels in 1846, people refused to allow the streets to be straightened and regularized. There's a reference to that. Cretan bull dancers. Okay, I'm just going to read this thing. Armies of meaningful observation coalesce around stories of evil vanquished in pizza parlors. The dead heroes risen to return us to old orders of righteousness in the supermarket, where the abused and abandoned seize control of signification distribution through networks of first-person shooter landscapes, clues dotted across world's enigma, unbound to Earth's dirty fact. Another way of thinking eludes convoys of despair lost in simple field of forces, signifies contracted spirits, self-eclipsing hunger for an end to meaning. Its final roundup in judgment's corral, where the Clantons fall in a hail of hot truth. Yes is a gate, a tunnel, through mountains surround Shangri-La, permission granted, healed, wound, a dream of virtue, return to valor, valor, return to the thought of oak. You can't fake that, and the path makes a sharp turn toward registers of time churned in cosmic tides ebb and flow. Images awash in surge of ruined tears wake, devoured world's ghost action no strapped mast can withstand. Odysseus, having set the standard for music appreciation amid the clamor home brings to quest's unsettled rush down Harupa toward the end of putting to work, a temporal zone created out of weights and swings, and recovered crannies' accumulation of local bells mark somatic anchors, unaligned habitation along ragged streets' resistance to smooth space. Brussels, 1846. The ragged way down is not the way back, much sought in circles of justified stasis, whose secret name animates societies of consensual future, guaranteed to fulfill the presentation of the presentable. The sea speaks of intricate passages unmade in depths of meaning, while the maddening abyss between meaning and chaos yawns beneath the breakfast table, where newly broken sunlight spills across day's opening, a language of rusticomore, ruleless, intimacy of unspecified articulate noise, forms and reforms, co-belonging with that which sets thinking on the road toward the end of the end, the pine beyond the pine beyond the language of pines, whispers with the breath of the sea, fragrant with salt and beached kelp, steams in noon sun. The road down veers past tomorrow inchoate, awaits a father worthy of indetermination's virtue, its virtuous adumbration in chaste line break cleanly against a pier, in distant poem throws the whole caboodle into a register alive with Cretan bull dancers, Sinatra's phrasing, and elusive Armageddon finally announces the end of questionable word locked away under nay's spell. Resentment's betrayal embraced to fill the whole of missing passage to truth's intimate assurance. It will be, will speak from confirmation each one now claims as its pulse in exposure, its rupture assigns to the gesture, laying bare brings to home. This is three. There's a reference at the beginning of this poem to the two-slit experiment, which is a very famous experiment that demonstrates the uncertainty of the actual nature of light. If you put two slits in them, many of you will know this, but for those who don't, if you put two slits in a surface and shoot light toward it, and then try to measure its position or its velocity, it behaves differently. If you're trying to measure its location, the photon, the basic unit of light, if you're trying to measure its location, when it hits those two slits, it behaves like a wave. And you can tell this because on the light comes through the slits, and then there's a screen at the back that's projected onto. And when you try to measure its location, the pattern you get on the board is a pattern associated with wave interference, which is to say when two waves meet, like so the light's going through two slits, and it's a wave. At some point they'll cross, they'll meet. It amplifies the wave. It becomes bigger. However, if you're trying to measure its velocity, when it hits the back screen, it's a scattered pattern of discrete points, as if it were particles. So the question is wave a light or is wave a particle? Well, which are two actually, they're not, one thing can't be both those things. It has to be one or the other, at least in our thinking of the world. But light, when you try to measure it one way, is a wave, and when you try to measure it another way, is a particle, which seems to indicate that our measuring is inadequate to actually get a take on the nature of light. It changes as we measure it. There's another experiment here mentioned, which is Maxwell's demon, which was a famous 19th century thought experiment that Maxwell came up with in order to demonstrate the way in which entropy works. And he puts a demon in a box with a wall in the middle, and the demon separates out the hot and the cold molecules. This has an epigraph from a really wonderful poet named Billy Chernikov. There's a woman under the table, no, and there's your mother's crystal goblet, the only one you haven't broken, tilted too close to the edge. Everybody knows the two-slit experiment's the best one, Maxwell's demon included. Though it is pretty cool to have a demon in your experiment, still, that's just a thought experiment. Not quite the real thing, like two actual slits and some real light, and questions of choose are not an issue, like they are with the demon, which makes it hot as experiments go, unless photons, whatever they are, that light stuff, deciding to fuck with you counts as choose, which most physicists would evade to follow Heisenberg's chicken shit lead and blame it on people, but late fallout, I guess, from humanism's chokehold on the imagination's throat leaves the world at the mercy of unconstrained users, while Bohr saw something more tangled, more mutually supportive, more creative, as if Billy's mother's crystal goblet was us, and the edge was a box with a cat in it. I know. And life and death was just a wager on the difference a single photon Mach Zehnder interferometer brings to the table when the chips are neither here nor there, and particular results scatter across screens where only yesterday Hoot Gibson fought the good fight under the sign of a white hat, and Empire whispered sweet nothings to young boys up early for the message brought from on high where the antenna sucked it down bearing Ovaltine injunctions, the truth of Wheaties, the passion of Oscar Mayer to minds enraptured by chiaroscuro dream bred in lost worlds, ghost images flickered in early morning suspension of singular demands to constrain the architecture to verifiable functions designation, while viewers, undulating uncertainty as regards destination's debt to destiny, left irregular to run roughshod over knowing, duped again, as Plato's old wine had it, into losing the thread of disbelief in overabundance of caprice, thickens terms of engaged, leaves truth a distant second, or maybe even third if you count cohere as particular results overwhelm scalar monotony, leave only tangled ecosystems anecdotal weave. of consent. I should mention there was an argument at the beginning and when they were first working out the nature of reality at very, very small scales, quantum physics. There was an argument about the nature of the process. And Erwin Schrödinger came out on the side of the proposal that the difference between measuring location or measuring velocity, that difference was actually the result of our limited ability to perceive the full world. And that as we looked for this or we looked at that, the results changed because of the way we looked. Niels Bohr, who was his, his thesis advisor or something, he was the senior guy, his proposal was, no, that's not it. It doesn't change because we look at it. That is to say, it's not a question of perception. It's a question of actual material change. Okay. Section 4. This begins with two epigraphs. There's a reference here in this poem, beginning with the epigraph to a movie, I think it was 1949 movie called DOA, starring Edmund O'Brien. And it begins, I saw this probably in about 1953 or 54, maybe 55, at my grandmother's house on Saturday morning. It was a time when the television was sort of beginning to expand beyond some quaint, weird little thing to a mass mode of public manipulation. And they needed content. They had no content. So Saturday mornings were full of them showing movies from the 30s and 40s and into the 50s. I watched the noir films and the Busby Berkeley and the Marx Brothers, and they came on one after the other after the other. It was, for me, it was my education in film. And Edmund O'Brien, this I've never forgotten this moment. Edmund O'Brien's walking down the street in black and white, right, chiaroscuro landscape, and he walks into the police station and finds a desk and sits down, and the detective says to him, well, what are you here? Are you here to report a crime? And he says, yes. And he says, well, what's that crime? And he says, murder. And the detective says, well, who was murdered? And Edmund O'Brien says, I was. Yeah, it's really spooky. It turns out he'd been poisoned, right? And there was no antidote to this poison. So he was going to die. And in fact, he dies in that chair at the end of the movie. But he gets to tell how he got poisoned before that happens. So this starts off with a quote from the movie. Frank Bigelow, Edmund O'Brien. I want to report a murder. Cop. Whose? Bigelow. Mine. And then a second quote From Edgar Allan Poe's The Facts in the Case of Monsieur Valdemar. For God's sake, quick, quick, put me to sleep, or quick, waken me, quick, I say to you that I am dead. The road down refuses dulcet tones to assuage dread's aroused quantum quicksand that's come to signify lack of desire in dismissive young eyes, flick over sagging skin, Eros's embers banked against loins, heat's final fade, staggers on slightly embarrassed by hopeless attention, firm curves administer to decency's spectre, haunts appropriates, lingering cling. Yeah, so what? Bones declare in terms uncertain no, that luck springs eternal in the human quest to end endless grief arises from that pool in heart's core. If it's death you want, you've come to the right place. Springs eternal or not, no relief appears on a horizon abuzz with countless Gary Coopers, unable to save my Saturday morning from time. Though without time, no Gary would have met my Saturday's magic, and I don't mean some trivial automorphism now passes for too much poetry, but eternity's infusion of profligate and promiscuous form seethes with utterable inconsistencies and unapologetic repetition. Iterations of Gary spreading through multiple registers of vibrational coherence, desires manifest profusion, verges on romantic, but isn't. That part of it finds the world of the heart's initiation in black and white doom images. More through screen's shadow travel the ether, shape souls hungry for knowledge of dread and joy. Tuned to frequencies infiltrate the cat's non-material receptors, neither here nor heaven, maybe in between. A continuous oscillation energizes the word horde long known to dwell near the phlogiston detector common to the brains of poets. As the poem forms into a node of intersecting, stepped down, vocalized bursts of meaning, offer just enough order as innards dissolve, each letter coming apart, pieces opening in a dream the blue gods adore, settled into calm welcome of disarticulated coherence announced by each birch leaf and passing merganser's morning hum over uncertain waters, nebulous depths. Another instance of downs, pervasive hail, tenuous instance of uncertain's mortal remains beckon from the sentence headed toward inevitable end as Saturday morning lives on and Edmund O'Brien announces he's dead, DOA, though on the hoof for the time being. An eerie business recalls Poe's Monsieur Valdemar. Poe probing the in-between where words break down and life and death dissolve into a putrescent constitutional crisis of closed resolutions unable to resolve Dick, as the way down now capitalized and implicated in even the price of gas and dissent's conspiracy, its conspiratio, a kiss that never ends, eternally fleeting as Dolphy's music wends through yesterday and into these lines, which threaten to lose their way in vertiginous proximity to images of uncertain provenance, or, say, uncertain's provenance, in the fear left to breed in corners by abandoned. a state of uncertain, generally apparent in mall land aesthetic, but here signifies mythic sidewalk encounter down around the 8th level, an abdication in the old man's passing eyes, blank look on young son, a stranger, left alone to figure out how to fly the tethered plane, a forgotten moment of quizzical pain bound to the ground of stunned, thoughtless gifts of uncertain. Five. This also has an epigraph, another one from Erwin Schrödinger. The task is not to see what has never been seen before, but to think what has never been thought before about what you see every day. When insomnia becomes isonomia, philosophy has a good laugh at the expense of the eager beaver poet, hot on the trail left by traveling misprisions on their way to the last outpost of meaning, this side of eternity, only to find politics already in charge of the fray, equal rights for the same old guys with the dough. Everyone else on your knees still sounds pretty much the same old, same old. Sleepless jest, however, brings humorless mind to its knees, invented to explain in perfect reasoned measure necessity of rapacious cupidity, rebranded as ambitious vision. Ambition having been rescued from its spot in hell by business-minded archons whose intent beyond general misery infliction remains mysterious, though resultant open pit mine cultural address to say lumber, former beings otherwise known to produce rather than consume oxygen necessary for life on the planet, otherwise known as natural resources, or say fish, otherwise known as $164 billion a year, an ontological status guaranteed to leave the place stripped bare, open for business, as if enough was an affront to hunger raised to the status formerly assigned envoys from zones of invisible input, from condition to state. Insatiable delirium leaves the way down gated, ticketed with limited express access available for those with the wherewithal to mangle impediments to their vocabulary and syntax and pave whatever geography they face with an asphalt sock lays speed and efficiency's grid over gesture and sign, wrest words from ragged co-belonging with present, leaves represent to study of connections to isonomia's grim transformation of sense into homogenetic signification machines' thinkable horizon, dotted with busy cranes, constructing sociological explanations to secure and house intimations susceptible to iterative indefinites' claim for ludibrion as a tonic for zealotry, in name of imposed general and delusional leveling, leaves sleepless philosophy jokes to fend for themselves, abandoned to teeming whims in the marshes at reason's outskirts, where bulrushes embrace secrets, float in from unknown origin to remind history of its quirky deltas and unreliable outcomes often claimed as victories, or at least signs of victory, even as truth is jettisoned in the name of equal right to call it whatever we feel like. After all, what is a fact but a cat in a box being tortured by physicists in the names again, of knowledge, which involves ripping off nature's veil as life and death hang around, waiting for the boys to open the damn thing and give the poor beast some air. That was Schrodinger's cat. In Crete, early Crete, Mycenaean Crete, previous to Mycenaean Crete, there's art that shows boys and girls leaping over bulls, the Cretan bull dance. And if you read Carl Karenyi's book on Dionysus, he makes this marvelous proposition about the bull dance, that there are three participants. The actual ritual was that they don't kill the bull. They grab it by the horns, catapult over the bull, and then Karenyi proposes land in the arms of the goddess on the far side. Those are the three participants: the dancer, the bull, and the goddess. In any case, it was a sacred ritual, and it involved this dynamic interaction between the human and the animal. Language offers itself as co-belonging with presence that sets thought a new task. Let me read you that again. Question of what does language do? Language offers itself as co-belonging with presence that sets thought a new task. Jean-Luc Nancy, The Gravity of Thought. Thought's new task, bright yellow, perches on a fence post, calmly eyes distant tree line, oblivious to world's intimacy problem, or the absent gold standard's continued interrogation of refer, beyond the point of carry, where it merges with childbirth in an unexpected reference beyond the usual kind. Summons her presence to poem's orders when the last thing on its mind was to return to conjugal arcanum's constitutive conundrum. Gaia and ocean, banished titanic powers, churn indeterminate depths. Is that the new task? The uncoiled figures lurk in caverns of no place to haunt this and that in the penumbra of reality's glare. Sensuousness of sense, rhythm, again out of nowhere, bearing this story or that story of the other story's story, the figure in and out of focus along with stored faces, the known impressions of a life that brings to mind Cretan bull dancers for the sheer spring of it, in the air, breathless, hoping for the best, so that her presence reminds the storyteller of her responsibility to all those intricate dances in the dark through vestiges of time's enigma that left the poem abandoned to hope of uncoiled patronage's impossible yes, given a distinct predilection for obscure texts regarding fulcra of the balances of being. See George Quash's Axial Flights, or gathering indifference centers toward precarious equivalents of emergent imaginary qualities. Anything goes, including that old Oedipal shibboleth about mothers and sons that delivers the world into hands terrified of gentle. Ahab's young bride abandoned on their wedding bed, or Ariadne dumped by Theseus after she saved his sorry ass. Wow, Harvey says, peering through a dangling modifier. For those of you who come to this book late, Harvey is a kind of prophetic ghost figure and choral figure, who haunts the poem with his observations. Wow, Harvey says, peering through a dangling modifier, that is some road, some passage, and some cool references. But do you know what you're doing, where it leads beyond your idea of death or soul descent? Toward end, answer, solution? What vessel do you aim for? Temple, tomb, house, womb, what pillar supports it? Hey, want a toque? And is it really down or around and out? The way down flickers and disappears. Sun flash off bays churn and surge leaves the poem geographically challenged, unsure where to turn, till a voice murmurs, "Listen, sweetie." Out of a sudden cloud of unknowing blows in from northwest, quoting the Duke, heavy with rain and intent on capricious interruptions and diversions, as news arrives of money thug flocks descending into Valley of the Sun from darkened skies to battle for attention in the heroic dimension of gallivanting super yachts, media mind nets, controlling interest in shattered moments' last gasp. Ever thus, you could say, those bastards won't leave us alone, so just get on with it. Easy to say beside the bay, tumult's passage cleared as wave after wave surges through water's weight, once ice, returned, breaks on stones, ice crushed, remainder. Not just before, but always. And the poem there at Curl's tip, surge beat on earth verge, the box opening, never opened, and the cat. Thank you.